not all that significant, but needs to be done. It needs to be done for the organizational reform is the last point I'll mention, which has been, which is necessary, and focus on business segments needs to come back.
All right. That's a complete synopsis out there, and let's get in some more voices in the discussion as well. Mr. Ravi Uppal joins in. Mr. Uppal, good afternoon, and your thoughts really, I mean, so many measures that have been done. If you're indeed laying out more tracks, maybe some more orders, as Mr. Chaudhary was saying, for the wagons, so on and so forth, all of that would probably lead to increased demand. How would you rate this rail budget for your company and even otherwise?
Well, you know, that my overall assessment of the budget presented by the Minister is very positive. I think that he has basically maintained the continuity of direction that he had, described last year. The government continues to expand, they continue to upgrade and modernize the complete railway infrastructure. Everything, they have announced formation of setting up of new freight corridors. They are upgrading all the railway stations, more coaches, more factories are being set up for production of the railway engines, etc., rolling stock. I think qualitatively, the government is very focused on that the railways have to be made of contemporary standard. So I think that's a very positive thing. The only thing which concerns me is about that the total performance in terms of revenue target they had last year, that we have missed on those. And of course, one has to accept the fact that the manufacturing sector in the country, mining sector, they have not been performing to the full potential, and therefore railways obviously could not get the required amount of freight, which they had accounted with. So I think as the economist looks up this year, I hope that he will be able to achieve a revenue target of 182,000 crores, which he has now set for the year 16-17. I think this is extremely vital that the railways, they remain healthy and their operating ratio should improve. I'm not very concerned about operating ratio at 92%. I think we need to sort of, do better to bring it to in the levels of 85 to 87%. But I do reckon it's going to take little time. So I think in terms of, the content of the budget, for upgradation and expansion of railway, I think truly commendable initiatives are there. But they really need to shore up their earnings. I think need to seek more share in the freight segment. Because that if you look at China, the state rail has a share of 53%. Whereas in India, we are only about 30% in the freight segment. I think the government has to really and there are some systemic changes to be done. Freight rationalization has to be done. I think government needs to address it more.
Sure. Mr. Uppal, and I'll come to some of those points as well, but I still have to take an initial comment from some of the other companies which probably stand to benefit out of this as well. Mr. Pundarika Bibi Reddy, he is the CEO of Global Operations Bartronics India. Now, Mr. Bibi Reddy, you of course have been a consistent supplier to railways. I don't know what's the kind of order inflow that came in for your company in the previous year. An update there, and anything that you thought would actually lead to increased order inflow for you as a company because of this budget? I don't think Mr. Bibi Reddy can hear me.
Thanks for having me today. In fact, the brightest signal for the company has been when the minister talked about barcode ticketing. Hello? Are you able to hear me?
Please carry on.
The brighter side, I was from the company's perspective, has been on the vision what he has talked about barcode ticketing and handheld ticketing systems, which is a sign of good hope for us because we are in that market and we are very strong in those areas, and that gives me a very positive hope for our business growth while partnering with railway needs. And overall, I felt that the strategy and the vision has been set by the minister, and he has been focusing. If you see the last year's budget, so the railways has been going through a vicious cycle of underinvestment, congestion, and overutilization. And he has made steps in this budget to take care of all this, and I can see a strong role in terms of expanding investment. And we are very proud that Bottronics will have a better share of business by partnering with Railways because of his vision to bring ticketing through handhelds and as well as the barcode system. Yeah.
Right. You know, public-private partnership, rupee bonds, LIC is funding 1.5 lakh crores worth of projects. So there are some ways of funding that he's trying to find out. Maybe it will take some time, but let's see. You know, Hind Rectifiers does a variety of railway transportation equipments. Mr. S.K. Nevatia has been waiting by as well. Mr. Nevatia, what stood out for you? Anything that will lead to increased order inflow for you as a company because of this budget? I saw 2 or 3 moves, nothing that more substantial, but anything that you figured out?
The long-term perspective of the budget is very good. It's on a very sound note, and in future we expect very good returns. But if you ask me specifically for the next year, I don't see anything clearly from the speech that something will help us. These all new railway lines, electrification will help us in the long run. But immediately, if you ask me next year, it's difficult to pinpoint from the budget speech what it is there for us for immediate next year.
What was the railway share?
That 2 new
Mr.
clients.
Nevatia, what was your share in railway orders for you as a company last year?
About 65%.
Okay, fair call.
We are trying to bring it down by increasing more on the other equipments.
Sure. Okay. Fair point.
But
fair point, Mr. Nevatia. Let me get in opening thoughts from some of the other experts as well. Now, you know, just before I get in Mr. Mittal back into this discussion, Mr. JP Chaudhary, this question is coming your way. A lot of wagon procurement announcements and order inflows are happening in and around this budget as well. We saw some announcements in January. Maybe some projects will be awarded in March. Do you think this 45% increase in wagon outlay that we saw last year, you could have an equal percentage increase for FY17 as well? I didn't hear any specific mention with regards to that.
Well, one has to go into the details of the budget to find out the exact figures. But say that the whole trend is very, very positive. It becomes very clear from the minister's emphasis that he realizes importance to be given to the freight traffic, and he is taking a number of initiatives in that regard. The exact number of wagons may depend on the traffic conditions, but one thing from the industry we have represented to the railways that wagon is a long-term investment. It is creation of a capital asset, and that should not be driven by the vagaries of any short-term downturn in the traffic. So we are sure that railways will continue to make a healthy procurement for capital assets like wagons.
Mr. Agarwal, the minister has set aside 1,21 lakh crores for the capital expenditure this year, as against just 1 lakh crore the previous year. How much will that benefit companies like yours, Mr. Agarwal?
See, as the minister announced that earlier, for award of tender, usually it used to take about 18 months to 24 months, which has been cut down substantially to 6 to 8 months now. So we are seeing, a clear tender pipeline of about 20,000 crore to be quoted in the next 2 to 3 months' time. And with all these announcements which has come in terms of, electrification of 2,000 track kilometers, then laying down of new tracks and gauge conversion, all these will take some time to translate into the new orders. But there is a clear visibility in terms of the expenditure which the railway intend to spend on these expansions, which is a clearly a good sign for KEC International.
Mr. Mittal, clearly the minister has not got disillusioned by the PPP model because he's still putting his faith in it. Do you see anything in this year's budget to make you feel that PPPs are more likely to succeed this year than in the past?
Yes, it would be, because they have started rolling out the project on the PPP model, and he has mentioned that as of now there is a 7 kilometer per day, and he wants to increase it to around 19 kilometers per day. So this much of the commissioning of the track within the resources that are available with the railways, it is difficult to achieve this target. So there is no other option but to go on the PPP model, as it has been in the road sector, because earlier it has to be only 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers. Now we are talking about the 30 kilometers a day. So yes, definitely there is no other option. I am quite confident that more and more projects would be coming on the PPP model.
Mr. Uppal, clearly the railway minister has set his sights very high. For a sector like yours, steel, do you think this will really come to the benefit of the steel sector? Because we've seen that the steel sector is really laboring under the problems of dumping of cheap imports from China. Do you think demand from the railways could in some way compensate for this? Or do you think the railways will also look to cheap Chinese imports of steel and companies like yours would not really benefit from the higher capital expenditure?
Definitely. I think, that if the railways total procurement increases, the steel sector will definitely be a major beneficiary, because the government is, talking in terms of adding more tracks, creating the freight corridors, upgrading the existing rail tracks to make them into broad gauge, etc. So you obviously have huge amount involved. And also when you go for the new concept of railway stations, the huge amount of structured steel which goes into building them. So I think all in all, the enhanced investment announced by the railways will augur very well for the steel sector. I must hasten to add that in the last 1 year, we have seen a lot more vibrancy from railways, and apart from more volume for procurement from railways, I think they also brought in a lot of transparency by resorting to reverse auction and going for e-auction kind of practices. And the decision making has also increased. I think there's a lot of action which is in witness in the railways at this point of time. Of course, we have to be realistic in expectation, because the government was first very busy, creating a new framework of policies and procurement, including the procurement policy, and now the action seems to be underway. So all in all, I think what the minister has announced, as was mentioned earlier by one of the participants, that the vision has been set, and he is sticking to that. That he wants to upgrade the railways network, make it modern, and also fully use the potential available from the e-commerce and also digitization of railway. I think all of them seem to be gaining roots, and therefore, if you keep that in view, I think it's a very positive budget. But I just want to wish railway better luck in shoring up their earnings, because we would like to see railways, that not suffering from any kind of deficit, but they should have potential earnings, so it remains as a sound entity.
Wouldn't we all? I think that's a wish that is well placed as well. But as we wrap up this discussion, and gentlemen, your all opinions have been very, very helpful. But Mr. Mathur, I'll wrap up this discussion with a final thought from you, and that is on what I thought was a key measure that was announced. A holding company for monetizing railway assets. Assuming that a company like this does get set up over the course of the next 6 months, and some of these assets do come within that holding company as well, how long before the railways can realistically monetize some key assets? Because that is one short way of getting more revenue.
I think it will take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And I take it over the next 2 or 3 years, the railways might start getting some revenue. Land is somewhere, they set up RLDA, and RLTA is trying to raise revenues through land. That might make some progress during the next financial year. But I think for other assets, it's going to take a much longer period.
Yeah, it's a long drawn process for sure. But gentlemen, all of you, thank you so much, all of you, for taking the time out and being with us patiently while the Rail Minister was delivering his addresses. And all the best with business from railways over the course of the next 12 months. Maithili, as always, thank you so much for taking the time out and taking us through this discussion as well. But this is the rail budget coverage.